I'm resident follower with Joel Sands for YouTube. This is my buddy Gordon Dymowski. We're here to talk the 1991 revival for Dark Shadows. When did you first watch this, Gordon?
I actually watched it as it came out. Just to give my Dark Shadows tale, I when I was in college, I would did part-time jobs, and I lived near a video store. In the glory days of VHS. You rent a tape for $2, three for five, and local video store had Dark Shadows, starting with Volume One. And I had known about Dark Shadows because you read about it in books about television. It's the show with the vampire, the guy with the cane, and the promo shot where he's like burying his teeth. And so I actually went to the Dark Shadows convention in LA in '91. So I knew about it, and I'd heard about this revival, and so I when it came on, I watched fervently, and I watched all 11 weeks until it was gloriously canceled, or not so gloriously canceled.
Very, very interesting cast here. We have Joanna Goings, who's playing Victoria Winters. Ben Cross, who's playing Barnabas Collins, very accomplished actor. Barbara Steele from the Hammer Horror days, playing Dr. Julia Hoffman. A very, very interesting cast, and from horror, from other realms, obviously with Ben Cross, Chariots of Fire. What did you think of Ben Cross as Barnabas Collins and Joanna Goings as Victoria Winters?
Well, I think Ben Cross brought a very different kind of energy to Barnabas. Whereas Frid was all kind of he was fearful and driven by fear, and he worried even though he put on a calm exterior. This Barnabas, the way he expressed his fear, but was by anger and snapping at people. I mean, you still had the ambivalence, the I don't really want to do this. And I think the other thing that Ben Cross had in common with Frid is they look like they stepped right out of their time. I mean, when you watch the 1790 flashback in the revival, he looks like he could have been partying with Thomas Jefferson. He looks like, hey, come on, let's me and let's have a drinking contest. Let's do shots with John Adams.
Yeah.
Just keep Ben Franklin away from the chambermaids because he's a little frisky, if you get what I mean. So I do think Cross did a very admirable job. I really like Joanna Goings' Victoria, actually more so than Alexandra Moltke's, because I think Moltke was too kind of clueless, and Going brought not only that kind of curiosity, but also a real sharp intelligence. I mean, at the end of the revival, she realizes pretty clearly that Barnabas is a vampire.
Yeah.
Like, she knows. Spoiler, people. And Barbara Steele, I see why they may have cast her, because she does have that history of being in. She was in one of Roger Corman's Poe films. She was in Black Sunday. She was also in, I think, one or two David Cronenberg films. But she seems a little too. I'm not sure who else I would have cast at the time, but she seems a little too upscale, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like she looks like she should be enjoying a glass of wine and listening to Mozart than hanging around with Barnabas.
Can I tell you this? To me, it feels like she should be more of a villain in this series than playing Julia Hoffman.
Yeah, and I could see if they had set up, even in that 11 episodes, if they had set up where, okay, she's giving him the injections, but instead of her falling for him, she's like, this guy's got to be stopped, and I got to figure out a way to do it. That's where you could see her character arc lead.
Right.
Not in because I know that with the original series, Julia was supposed to be Julian, and he was supposed to be like the guy that Barnabas went up against. But because of a typo, it became Julia. Sam Hall was like, hey, look, my wife, she wants to get out of the house. She wants a job. Just give her the role. And Grayson says, oh, I think I'm going to fall in love with this cute Napoleon cosplaying Canadian. Whereas I think with Steele, she's you could see at least the chemistry between Grayson Hall and Jonathan Frid.
Yeah.
I don't really see that. I don't think she's bad in it. I just don't see that chemistry between the two characters.
I have a question for you. Scale of 1 to 10, how psychotic is Lizette Anthony's Angelique?
11.
Yeah, for sure.
No, she's really good. And I think too, it's where, and I think it's interesting when you look at the background of this revival, because it came of age during, there's a big writer's strike similar to what we have now in 88 or in 89. And one of the strike rules was that you could adapt past storylines. You could literally take scripts and change names, but you couldn't write any new scripts. It affected Star Trek: The Next Generation, where they almost went out of production because of that. There was actually at the time a 2-season revival of Mission Impossible for ABC, because I think ABC was like, okay, we need something for Saturday nights. And they saw that an Australian studio was going to do a straightforward revival with scripts, and they would recast everyone. But ABC said, hey, we'll give you a little bit of money, hire Peter Graves, and we'll just change the names of the other characters. And I think that I know that with the Dark Shadows revival, I think part of the reason why it stays so close to the TV show is I'm sure that Curtis was working on it and developing it during 88, 89, and by the time it hit production, he's like, oh, what the hell? Let's just stick with it. Let's not even try to do new scripts at this point. But back to your point, no, Lizette Anthony was, because she was in a Jack the Ripper miniseries in 88. And because I think Michael Caine was the lead, and she was like kind of like if I remember the role correctly, she was like more of a, she was more of kind of like a regular person, but she really goes for it in this. It's not just the special effect of her floating through the air. Like she's got that kind of, Laura Parker was a schemer, and she could play the innocent, but then turn and be evil and seductive. Angelique is just like, she goes from 0 to whoa mama in 3 seconds.
I like how, well, I'll get to the ghost here in a moment, where the big difference with, like, especially to Laura Parker's Angelique and Lizette Anthony's Angelique is Lizette Anthony's Angelique was willing to kill Barnabas just with a knife. I mean, okay, I can't have you, then nobody can have you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's insane. With Angelique, she wasn't, Laura Parker's Angelique wasn't trying to kill Jonathan Frid while he was alive, Barnabas while he was alive, at least. Well, in a sense, but she curses him because she's dying. She thinks she's dying. With Angelique, with Lizette Anthony's Angelique, she knows she's dying for sure. She got stabbed. There's no pistol. There's no, oh, he's a bad shot with a gun. We know he's a great shot with a gun in this revival. He killed Jeremiah. But I really like how when her ghost appears, when Angelique's ghost appears, and Barbara Steele's Dr. Hoffman's like, what is that? That, my dear doctor, is the witch. And he's just like so calm when he says this. It's like, yeah, I figured this was coming. That's how it seems.
Yeah, I mean, this Barnabas is kind of like chill. He's like, you would never call Frid's Barnabas a hit it and quit it kind of guy. And
Right.
Ben Cross's Barnabas is all about hitting it and quitting it. Like, This is probably unlike, in comparing the two storylines, you could probably, if you squint hard enough, you could probably justify that. Yeah, of course, Ben Cross's Barnabas kind of deserves it because he was sneaking around. Whereas I think with Frid's Barnabas, I always get the feeling that it wasn't just a one night thing, that there was some emotional component to it. Yeah. That it may have been that, yes, there was physical infidelity, but Barnabas may have like bared his soul to Angelique in a way that he probably couldn't to Josette.
Is it fair to call Ben Cross as Barnabas like the James Bond of vampires?
I would say no for one simple reason. I think that it's his fear comes more out of, like I said, his fear comes more out of when he's afraid. It's anger and snapping, and this is also, and I'm going to publicly argue with Patrick McRae on one point. He said that Barnabas should never wear turtlenecks. Prove it, bro. Ben Cross makes it work. I will fight you on this show. Come at me, bro.
Oh God. What did you think of Jim Fay's Willie Loomis?
I think Jim Fife did a really good job of, with Willie, you can't really touch John Carlin's performance because Willie is kind of like half schemer and half scumbag, and he's not very bright. What Fife did was he didn't make him a schemer. He kind of took that gave him maybe a little bit more of an innocence, so to speak. But he was still kind of an idiot. And I think his Willie works really well with Ben Cross's Barnabas, because if you have a schemer, like if you put John Carlin's Willie against Ben Cross's Barnabas, I think Ben Cross's Barnabas would call them out early and literally just said, okay, he turned the John Carlin Willie Loomis into the Jim Fife Willie Loomis. Because I think this Barnabas is not one you want to mess with. I love Jim Fife as Willie.
Yeah, I'm with you. He he does a really great job. I love the changes the writers make here and Dan makes too. That okay, we're not making Jim Five's Willie Loomis this big thief. There's no Jason McGuire. He's related to Mrs. Johnson, and he lives at Collinwood. She works there, and he's like you said, he's very like sort of aw shucks innocence in a sense. It sort of reminds me of a lot of characters the guy who played Ernest P. Worrell did, like when he did.
Oh, Ernest. Yeah, Jim Varney.
Yeah, Jim Varney. It sort of reminded me of that a bit, not to the exact nature of it, but it reminded me of it a bit. And with his character, I like how, because again, the revival's only one season, so it's sort of hard to sort of prop it up against the original with all the characters they did the changes those characters went through, because again, the revival only got one season. But I really like what they do very quickly with Jim Five's Willie Loomis. He doesn't stutter anymore when Barnabas bites him. He's still the same, very much the same person he was when he last talked to his aunt. He hasn't changed that way. He's a very kind person, and he's a very caring person. He wasn't this rough, hard-edged thief that John Carlin's Willie Loomis was. And that's something our mutual friend Patrick McRae had asked me, who's the character that grows up the most in the original series? And I said, Willie Loomis. Because of where he started from. Mm-hmm. With this, Jim Fay's Willie Loomis, I don't know if he grew up the most, but he definitely really takes a whole entirely different approach, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, and and Jim Fife is one of those actors who I think now he's doing a lot of coaching for actors. I don't know if he's part of the strike, but like and it's one of the, I think it's one like the first or second season of Law and Order: Criminal Intent. It's the season ender, and it's about basically a guy who's pumping up his stock even though he's bankrupting the company. And there's a character at the beginning who's talking about, hey, look, I'm looking at my stocks. This there's something going on here, and it's Jim Fife. He's got the glasses, and he's super serious, and he's super intense, and I think it's a tribute to him that with this arc, and I've always felt that if I could jump into any band of parallel time, I'd like to see where this became a full year season. Part of it is that there are some plans for that second half, but his arc is the most interesting because he goes from being kind of goofball, for lack of a better term, to slightly more confident. And I would have loved to see how that would have gone throughout the year. So, yeah, you're right. He's the one character who kind of grows the most in that half year.
Yeah, I'm sort of wondering because again, you're right. He's becoming more confident. I'm sort of wondering if they would have given him a relationship with a female character in season 2, if there would have been one. It'd have been interesting to see if they would have did that.
It would be interesting to see if they had matched him up with Carolyn in this, because I know I forget her maiden name. I think not Barbara Babcock, Barbara, but the actress who plays Carolyn, she plays it a lot more bad girl.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's not in terms of, it's more in terms of attitude than say costuming. I know she's married now, and she was actually in a 2020 film directed by Vera Farmiga, who was the mother in Bates Motel. I forget the name of the film, but yeah, it was funny to see like the bad girl, the kind of really, kind of attitude-driven female Carolyn, combined with this particular Willie Loomis.
Yeah, I really like the fact that in this series too, you get Roy Finnis, who plays Roger Collins, who's having a relationship with Maggie Evans.
Yeah, that's a great curve. You don't expect that coming. And I do think Roy Finnis is he's one of those actors that I mean, he was a major lead in The Invaders, which is a 60s sci-fi show, but he's one of those character actors that no matter what he's in, even if he's in a 5-part, you can't help but I just love him as an actor because he just has such a great stuff. Like if you were to, and I know I'm going to get in trouble for mixing metaphors, but if you needed a David Selby of the 1991 Dark Shadows, I would say it's Roy Finnis.
Yeah, I could sort of see that too because he had this sort of appeal about him when he was on screen. He had a very much command about him that sort of reminds you of David in a way.
Mm-hmm. And his Reverend Trask was awesome.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like he's actually one of my favorite characters in the revival because he's just so fun to watch when he's on screen, whether he's Trask or Roger. And I really love the fact that when him and the actress who plays Maggie Evans, when they're on screen together, you could tell like he's sort of they are having a romantic relationship, they are having sex, but there's some conversations between them where he's telling her about how scared he is of his son and his wife, and then there's it feels like it's not just wham bam thank you ma'am at times between them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's one of the clever. I think the revival does a couple of things, makes a couple of really kind of significant changes from the series, not just in terms of relationships, but I think my suspicion is they took a lot of their tone. There's a series of, if I remember correctly, there's a series of like romance novels at the time that were known as bodice rippers that were more about, you had HBO and Cinemax, or as we called it in the day, Skinemax, had a lot more kind of, you had Red Shoe Diaries, kind of the jazzy music, kind of more suggestive kind of storytelling. And I think they were able to inject a lot of that along with that gothic feel so that it didn't just feel like, okay, even though they were hitting similar plot points, they kind of thought through, and okay, we don't have that initial year. We don't have that initial 210 episodes to summarize. How do we get this rollicking right out of the gate?
Yeah. And I really think they did a good job of going back to 1795 and having the difference of being, it wasn't the same exact thing with, because Joanna Going's Victoria Winters, like you said, she knows by the end of the story. And here's the thing. Here's what I love too. Ben Cross's Barnabas knows that she knows. And there's just a stare between them. There's no words. It is just golden by the end of this series. What did how shocked were you by Joe Haskell's death in this?
I was really surprised. I kind of think that first, I think Michael T. Weiss is a great actor.
Yeah.
I think he nails this role. I know at the time there was talk that had the series gone on, that Adrian Paul, who played Jeremiah, would have been Quentin. I think if they really if the producers really wanted to change it up, you have Michael T. Weiss as Quentin.
Yeah.
Because I think not only would have knocked it out of the ballpark, but imagine introducing him as the immortal werewolf at the beginning of season 2, and the Collins family is like, well, wait, no, you look like Joe Haskell. No, I'm not Joe Haskell. I'm Quentin. But why do you look like him? We don't need to know, but it's I do think this was I think they did it mostly for like shock value, but because they really should have kept him around. I think he would have been a really good. I know he played Peter Bradford in the 1790 flashback, but I think they missed a prime opportunity.
If you really want proof that he could have played Quentin, go watch the series The Pretender.
I've seen it.
Yeah,
I watched it at the time, and I catch reruns. He is good.
I figured you did. That's also for our audience too, who watches this. Go watch The Pretender. It's really good, and if you ever wonder if he could play the character, there's characters in there that he's sort of, because he's posing as other people, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I'll also say, to advocate for The Pretender, there's an actress named, I think, Andrea Parker. Hubba hubba. I'm just going to leave it there.
Great series, really, really great series in the 90s. Is there an actor you would have liked to seen in the revival?
Ooh.
Or actress even?
Let me think. I'm just trying to think of. I'm just trying to think of who would have been around at the time. I mean, I'm going to go I'm going to make this as obvious, but it's a very deep cut. If they were to ever do, say, go back to Brutus, they ever have Brutus Collins, Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
That would have been awesome. I'm trying to think who else I would have. And it's kind of hard too, because thinking back, it's like who would be an easy fit. I might have, if you were going to have focus on Maggie Evans' family, have Adrienne Barbeau play her mom, because I don't think they established that her mom was dead or anything. That would be interesting, simply because it's that very deep cut that you have to kind of think about it before. I mean, I also would have loved to have seen Roger Corman and or John Carpenter direct an episode of the series.
Yeah, that would have been really cool. I would have loved to have seen. I'm not sure if I don't believe the X-Files was on yet, but I would have loved to seen Gillian Anderson as the Phoenix. I think that.
Well, it's funny you say that, because part of the plans, and these were just ideas that were floating. They weren't written down. One of the ideas they were thinking about was introducing Lysette Anthony as Laura. So I think they might have been combining the Angelique and Phoenix storyline.
Oh wow, that'd have been interesting.
And that's why I wish we had a whole 22 episode season, because they probably would have done 1890. They would have probably done Adrian Paul as Quentin, but I would love to see where they went with it.
Yeah.
And I actually had this conversation with Patrick because he and I were talking about the revival series, and I kind of thought that and that Patrick kind of made the argument, and again, he's not here. Patrick, will be back and he'll tell me how wrong I am. But I think he's making, he was expressed concern that like Dan Curtis might have had a little bit too of an iron grip on the storytelling. And I had to argue, and my counter argument was, okay, you've got Matthew Hall, who is younger, who could advocate for more creative storytelling. You also need to engage your audience, and you're not just bringing in the classic audience, but you're bringing in a new audience.
Yeah.
You also have you've got also a greater body of work to pull from. Like you not only have John Carpenter, you have David Cronenberg, you have Clive Barker, you have Robert R. McCammon, you have Stephen King.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that they probably would have reached out and said, "Hey, Stephen, Robert, write scripts for us." I think Richard Matheson was still around at that time. And if they didn't ask him, they could have asked his son, Richard Christian Matheson, or even their cousin, Tim Matheson, who played Otter in Animal House.
Yeah.
No, he's not their cousin. Totally different. But he did do the voice of Johnny Quest in the 60s. That's
Cool.
a fun fact for you kids out there. Yeah, Tim Matheson. I mean, he was a kid at the time, but yeah, he did the voice.
Cool. I did not know that. I think another actor I would have loved to have maybe seen play Quentin, and I know he was more of he did a movie. I'd have loved to have seen Roddy Piper just play something.
I'm thinking with Rowdy Piper, I would love to see him. Trying to think of, and this is way out there. If we got like a year 2 or 3, you make him Judah Zachary.
Yeah.
And make him, instead of the head and body, you just have him just look pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And you have him instead of Judah Zachary being, he could do menace.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And since he's physically imposing, it's not just like, he's not going to go down like Judah Zachary in 1840, where Desmond shoots Gerard and he just kind of poofs. Like there's a fight there. There's a serious fight.
Yeah, you could have physicality and choreograph a fight around Roddy Piper for sure. I mean, John Carpenter did it, and they live. Really well done too. Another guy would have, again, and he was around too in the '90s too. Would have been Tobin Bell. Sort of sticking with the horror theme. He'd have been a lot of fun to see in a Dark Shadows episode.
Yeah, he's from the Saw movies, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, I think it would have been hard to find the right part. Maybe he's Ezra Braithwaite.
Yeah.
Or I'm trying to think, or what? He's Buzz. He is Buzz.
Yeah.
Or a better idea. You bring him back as, hear me out. Here's the pitch. Jason McGuire, leader of the Leviathans.
You know who I would have had play? This would have been a stretch too, because he doesn't look like Thayer David, but again, it's a reboot. You know who I would have had play Count Patofe?
Who?
Michael Desbarres.
Oh yeah, he would work. And you know what? If you're, and I would, and I've been pushing this. And Mark B. Perry, you do. This is my only suggestion to you. Professor Stokes, John Noble. Yeah, and I think too. It's one of the disappointing things about talking about the revival, is that it's not even a full season. So it's like, because it's just a half season, like you can't really. Yes, you can criticize and analyze it, but there's so much promise there. In fact, if I can do a little bragging, I actually was so moved that I was part. After the show was canceled, there were protests at various NBC stations in major cities, and I was protesting in Chicago because it's literally you go downtown, you go down Mission Avenue, you take a walk, and NBC is right there. Although I don't think I did it right. And you have to understand, I was in my 20s, and I was a bit of a knucklehead. I was one of two lovable scamps who were, kind of, getting into shenanigans on the Prodigy Dark Shadows bulletin board. I'm not going to say who the other scamp was. All I'll say is this: he has been featured on this show quite regularly, and you know him because he regularly hawks two of his written works. I'm not going to go any further. And when I knew him, he had a lot more hair and no goatee.
That could be anybody on this podcast. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, and this person does not host his own Dark Shadows podcast. But back to protesting. So we had people in cosplay, and we had signs, and I came up with slogans, and the other protesters did not like my slogans, and now I understand why. One of them was "Barney is my buddy," which no, that's not right for Dark Shadows. And the other thing is you can't kill something that's already dead, which is probably for a canceled TV show not the smartest thing. Probably not. And I hope I've earned enough cool points with the Dark Shadows fans watching. And if you're watching, like, share, subscribe. Get more people to watch this podcast, people. Jewel has a very limited budget, he can't. He's an international jet setter. He's got a lot on his plate. Help him. Spread this on the Twitter and the Facebook and the Threads and the Blue Sky and the Instagram. Do the social things. Get your kids a shirt on the Tickety Talk. Come on, people. You love Dark Shadows. Help Jewel out. That's all I'm saying.
The fun thing about the revival too, though, is though we don't get a full season, and though we never get a season 2, it's always fun to play what if with it.
Yeah, it's great too. In fact, it's because there's so little there. I mean, you want to. I'm grateful for it because it's better to have 11 episodes where you could see where it was going. I'm trying to think. Well, let me ask you. What did you think of Gene Simmons as Elizabeth Stoddard?
I think she was good for her role. I do think, again, because there's only one season, half a season, if you will, that her character would have probably been a lot more involved in season 2. I'd like to think.
Yeah.
Because Gene Simmons, I feel like her being there, they're more having her for a name. I mean, she's got lines and scenes, but it's not Joan Bennett.
Yeah, and they kind of hired, the reason I think they hired Gene Simmons was the same reason why they hired Joe Bennett, which is Joan Bennett's not an actress. She's a movie star.
Yeah.
And at the time, you wanted someone who had that name. And if you wanted to do research, Joan Bennett, there's been a little bit of controversy in her past, mostly around her involving a shooting. There's actually a whole podcast about it. So I would say Joan Bennett, look up stories about Joan Bennett. So I think they needed someone who could bring some of that regal air. And plus that was where Joan Bennett perfected what we now know as resting bitch face. And I think Gene Simmons was there for kind of the same thing. It's that kind of suggestion of old glamour, and a different, older time. And I do agree with you. I think that she was very underserved in the role, but I think it's kind of hard to know because we don't even have when Dark Shadows went off the air, Sam Hall wrote an article about this is what I would have seen that happened to them. We didn't get that. In fact, I wrote some fan fiction because we didn't get that. And I was actually published The World of Dark Shadows 74. It's a story called Revelations. If you go to Penny Dreadful's podcast, Terror at Collinwood, and you look for, it's the one where it's the woman who runs the DS Discord. There's a Google Doc. They talk about a Google Doc that has all this fan created stuff. And I linked to it. And I actually read my story. And for something that's written in my early 20s, it's really, really damn good. And I'm surprised.
Cool. Really, really cool. I think, too, with the revival, like, they do, for the most part, for the most of the characters, they do a really good job slapping a fresh coat of paint on a lot of these characters whose names we know, because for the most part, a lot of them are just the characters by name only. They're very different from the characters from the 1960s, and that was very smart because, hey, it's a reboot. Two, you don't want to make them exact clones of the characters you know from the 60s, but you don't want to stray so far that they're unrecognizable.
Right.
And I think the revival does the best of both. Does it the best way possible.
Yeah, and I think because they were hampered by that 88, 89 strike, yeah. I think they played to those strengths. Because I do suspect that in the middle, let's say close, if say they hadn't gotten the news, around the time they would have gotten the news for the cancellation, if that hadn't happened, Matt would have been going to Sam Hall saying, Dad, I think we can go different. I think we can start throwing in some of these more recent ideas. Sam would be like, you're just like your mom. I'm going to go smoke a cigar. And Matt was like, no, seriously. And then they go to Dan Curtis, who'd be glaring at you like, yeah, I don't want to have to do all that new stuff. And Sam would be like, yeah, I don't want to listen to, let's listen to Dan. And Matt's like, look, Curtis, I could wipe the floor with you, okay? Okay, I can bring the pain. This ain't New York, you don't have my mom to push around anymore, okay? You don't, if we're going to do this, let's make it a really good revival. And I think that the latter half of that season 1 would have been where things would have started to get even more different. So that by hypothetically, if there was a season 2 and a season 3, you might end up making it like, say, the Leviathans, but led by Judah Zachary.
Yeah.
Or you'd start to have more original kind of plot lines because you just have so much more to pull from.
Yeah. I sort of wonder if, because in the original series, we did get Jekyll and Hyde. I wonder if we would have got a Jekyll and Hyde in the revival.
That would have been interesting. I think that would have been, it could have been interesting that instead of doing it with a potion, maybe Cyrus Longworth in the 1991 revival would have been maybe experimenting with, there's a couple ways you could do this. One would be maybe have him trying to increase intelligence via computer because the internet was just starting to become a thing. The other is you could pull from, have you ever seen David Cronenberg's movie, The Brood?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, it's about a psychotherapist played by Oliver Reed, who, as Patrick McRae will tell you, was a sober guy who never touched a drop of alcohol in his life. And he's developed this science called psychoplasmics, where you manifest your anger and your negative feelings as like they grow out of your body. They're not tumors, they're just kind of constructs.
Yeah.
And his wife is, involves the main character is a guy who's dealing with custody issues, and he's seeing this therapist, and it turns out the therapist's wife is actually giving birth to babies out of her own sense of anger, and these are growing up into be murderous children. And I could see where maybe you adopt that story as Cyrus Longworth has developed a way to kind of put his negative feelings into, somehow able to manifest them physically. So that instead of getting like a Chris Pennick dual role, you have two actors playing the two roles, so that John Yeager can be, so like you have a clue of John Yeager does something, murder someone, but it's still Cyrus Longworth's fingerprints. How do you get that?
Yeah.
And Cyrus is like, well, I was home asleep, or I was doing this. So you do have a way to do that that's not dependent on, it's not a straightforward Jekyll Hyde riff, but it's a way to get the same idea across.
Could they have pulled off like the Clockwork Orange then?
I don't know, because I think part of it at the time, Clockwork Orange was seen as, I know there's a period of time where the movie Clockwork Orange was seen as a bit too extreme because of its violence.
Yeah.
I could see where it becomes like okay, Cyrus Longworth is trying to condition the negativity out of him, but yet it's somehow, because of magic, it manifests as John Yeager.
Yeah. That it had been really interesting to see like a Jekyll and Hyde sort of thing in the revival. Mm-hmm. That had been really, really interesting. We do see possession by the end. Angelique is body jumping like crazy. We see the death of Joe Haskell because she's in Julia Hoffman's body, and she stabs Joe. Poor
yeah,
Joe.
And for those watching, body jumping is not 90s slang for naughty stuff. She's literally inhabiting other people. I just want to get that clear. And Patrick, get your mind out of the gutter. I know you're watching this, Patrick. He's probably going, oh God, I wish I were there, because this conversation needs to stop.
He'll be watching it later. By the end, we get Maggie Evans, who's been a medium throughout this revival, and I love that. I love that change with Maggie, and she's trying to get Angelique out of Hoffman's body. She does, but now Angelique's in Maggie's body, and it's really, really going to be interesting. It had been really cool to see where they took that. I sort of wonder if Roy Thennis would have been a lot more of a hero in season 2 and try to maybe go after her in a way, Maggie, maybe figure out that she is possessed. That'd have been interesting.
And if they were planning to combine the Angelique and Phoenix storyline and makes Angelique somehow a re-manifestation of his wife, that would have been really interesting.
Yeah.
And it's disappointing, because you can't, postulating like this when you have, say, like we have a lot of the original series. We pretty much have all of it except for one reconstruction. So doing these kind of fan things, it's interesting, but you're kind of given, at some point it's like you can be like, okay, no, that didn't happen. Like no, Willie Loomis never pimp slapped Jason McGuire, even though we wanted him to. Here, there's so much there, and I think it's basically, if there was proof that Dark Shadow still had legs, I think it was like 25 years after it debuted. I mean, that was proof that, yeah, this is a viable thing. I mean, it was so viable that I'd watched your episode with Patrick about the 2004 pilot.
Yeah.
And so I did a little research, because I'm thinking, okay, why did they, because I knew Buffy had gone off the air, so I figured, why didn't they wait like a year or two to do it? Yeah. And the reason they did it was that Dark Shadows pilot was going to be the replacement series for Buffy. And it's like, no. You do not replace Buffy with Dark Shadows. Buffy is basically, it's basically dollar store cosplay Dark Shadows. And I'm not saying Joss Whedon was inspired by the series. I'm saying he plagiarized it wholesale. Yeah. I am sticking to that. If you don't like it, fight me.
Yes. You have to come on the podcast and debate Gordon Dymowski.
And you got to debate, and we'll bring Patrick on, because, it's Patrick who brings the viewers, like I'm sure people earlier were like, oh, I don't want to hear this guy. He's only funny when Patrick's around. We love you, Patrick. Okay.
I like hearing from everybody. Oh my God! Is there anything you want to add about the revival before we go, Gordon?
Well, first you can find it on YouTube. All
Yes.
11
Oh,
episodes are free to watch.
yep.
You do have to put up with ads, but hey, just imagine you're back in 1992. Um,
Yeah.
my dream, if I ever win the lottery, is I want to call up MPI and I call up Shout Factory. And what I want to do is I'd love to put together a Blu-ray and DVD mega set. So we remaster all 1245 of the original episodes.
Yeah.
We do the Dark Shadows 11 episode miniseries.
Yeah.
We do what we can to license both House and Night of Dark Shadows. And Night, I want to see if we can finally get the uncut director's edition in. I want to pull in the pilot if I can. I also want to. There's a um, back in the 90s. There's a great documentary called Dark Shadows Behind the Scenes that I would include that and just put it all in one big box set.
That would be awesome. That would all be awesome. I would definitely love to see Shout Factory get involved with Dark Shadows and maybe do a remaster Blu-ray of the original series,
Yeah.
plus and definitely a Blu-ray of the revival. Now you can get the revival on DVD on Amazon. I did see it on there. So if it's still on there, I'll leave a link in the description box
Right.
where you can also get
But
it.
no 2013 Tim Burton movie. And before any of you complain, but I like the movie. It's okay to like the movie, but let's admit that it's not perfect. It is okay to like bad movies. There are people who think that The Room by Tommy Wiseau is some kind of so bad it's good movie. It's not. It's just bad.
I've got a movie I love that a lot of people think is bad. Halloween Resurrection. Anyway.
Yeah, but Halloween Resurrection, at least there's effort put into it. You know what I mean?
Yes. Uh, I love how they in the movie they have the Myers house is a set. They build a set for the Myers house. Really, because it's filmed up in Canada. It's not filmed in California. Resurrection is. So for Gordon Dymowski, link to Gordon's Amazon page will be in the description box. Oh wait, Gordon, is there anything you want to plug of yours?
Let's see. Right now, well, I should in the next couple of weeks. I should have I will have a short story being published in an anthology from Airship 27 Productions called The Challenger Chronicles. I don't know when the ETA is and that they're putting it together. I've also written an essay for Jim Beard's Crazy 8 Books about the classic series of Star Trek. You can read my work in his Subterranean. It's the one Jewel always links to. It's the volume 3 of the Batman 66 commentaries. I've also have an essay in Rising Sun Reruns, which is all about Japanese television shows of the 70s, 80s, 90s. And it's, basically it's like, think of it as Power Rangers. And it includes the early years of Power Rangers, but on a really limited budget. So there's all this stuff. But more importantly, go watch the revival and then come back here, comment, tell me how I'm wrong about everything and how much better Patrick McRae is I'm at. And, even say like, hey, why couldn't Jewel have gotten like the two hostesses of Between the Shadows, Beneath the Shadows?
Between the Shadows.
Between the Shadows? Yeah, they're charming. Why do you have that Chicago loudmouth guy on? Like do that. Help Jewel. We love Jewel. Help him. Turn him into a YouTube sensation.
The only thing I need to be a sensation at is continuing to be a parent. Anyway, all right. For link to Gordon's Amazon page is going to be in the description box. Huge shout out to our mutual friend Patrick McRae. Gordon, buddy, you have a great night.
You too. Good night.
Good night.
Night all.
Bye.